Alex, welcome to the garbage that is Monday morning that also includes us. Hooray!
Good morning, Giant Bomb.
Well, let me just turn down my own big knob here. Just
Yeah.
turn you all the way down.
Good. That's good. That'll make conversation go real well today.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of like Google Effects captions option, right?
Yeah, like a subtitle for Google Effects. That
Oh.
would.
I'd also just like to point out, this won't mean anything to almost anyone watching this, but so like when I create the promos for these chats or show, I just put in gibberish, and right
Yeah.
now the front page promo just says ASDF.
Good work. You've done well, Patrick Klepek. You are clearly on the ball when it comes to this shit. Good work.
Well, because it's getting into technical stuff, but with our chat pages are different than our promo pages, and yeah, okay. I thought about changing it, but I switched it back. So
Fair
for
enough.
a brief amount of time, there was a glaring error on the front page because I never make any errors otherwise, and it's embarrassing that I would have made one this morning.
Here's a trick I've learned about getting through things on the internet like this.
Hmm.
Don't try.
Yeah, man, that is.
Don't trying is so overrated. Just do the laziest, most half-assed thing you possibly can, and people will love you for it.
That's a good point. Yeah, or else you get called a hipster on the internet.
Yeah, there is that too. Yeah, well, that's sort of you take the good, you take the bad, something something, the facts of life, the facts of life.
Yeah, we talked about this very briefly before we started, but over the weekend, I made a tweet. I know. Rad- Radical.
Hey now,
I
weekend
thought
tweeting.
I thought that stuff turned off on the weekends, but so I had basically my first weekend, my first time to really sit down, play a significant amount of GTA 5.
Sure.
I had kind of plucked away at it before, but that game takes a while before you kind of get into the rhythm of A, how you want to play it, and just B, understanding sort of the nuances of what's kind of going on in the world and sort of the rhythms of the world itself. And I finally was able to sort of establish that this weekend and sort of get the game and was sort of having a really good time with it. But one of the things that sort of made me laugh and still makes me laugh every single time I finish a mission is when the sub-objectives come up and you get assigned to some sort of medal, because you don't get any indication about what those subject objectives are during the
No,
mission.
no.
Most of them are just poorly designed to begin with. Like when I saw headshots on one of the first ones, I thought that made sense because it was the first gunfight I'd gotten in. So, well, yeah, they're gonna want to maybe encourage you to, yeah, there's the snap to aim, but then adjust it a little bit so you can get more precise aiming. But no, then there's like 12 more missions that are like get 8 headshots. It's like that's doesn't sound that fun.
No.
And in general, I found the medals to be the equivalent of trying to get 100% sync in Assassin's Creed, which is that I feel bad for people that feel this need to get all that stuff,
Right.
because I don't, and
No.
so I can just ignore it and move on. But I know there are people out there that is a huge thing for them in games, and so when they are so poorly designed and implemented as they are in GTA 5, that seems like that could be really infuriating.
Yes. And for my part, I have spent no time trying to get those medals whatsoever. Like, if I get a gold, it is purely on accident. Most times, I've managed to get through most of them with silver, so I've gotten a few bronzes, mostly when I've hit a mission and I only do this with side missions, but any side mission that I'm just not having fun with, I will hit that skip button the second it pops up. I don't care enough about the side missions or the other shit going on in that game to where I am willing to sit there and do stuff over and over and over again. I realize that, to a lot of people that is probably cheap. That is, I'm not getting the full experience by not going through this stuff. I don't give a shit because none of that stuff is actually fun enough to where I am willing to do it over and over and over again just for the sake of trying to get some dumb medal or, even just for the sake of getting a completion on some side mission that doesn't actually tie into the main thing.
Well, yeah, like for example, I ran into the first time where I was tempted to hit skip mission when I had my first street race, and I had picked, let's say, a car poorly suited for a street race that was fishtailing all over the place, and even though I'd come to grips with the driving at that point, in a racing scenario, this was not the kind of car you would want, and it struggled to even keep up with the AI, and in order to finish this street race, it wasn't just get to the end, it was get in first place.
Right.
And eventually, I actually managed to finish it. I said I'll give it one more shot before I just straight up skip it, and I did manage to get first place. But I'm glad that feature is there. I think
Oh
that's
yeah,
a smart addition, especially when you take into account the continued statistics that indicate most people do not finish their games.
right.
Where at that point we're talking about a much wider audience, and probably not necessarily the kinds of people tuning into a show like this. But statistically, the vast majority of people see a very tiny percentage of the overall game, and so having a feature like that, I think, helps those types of people. And at the same time, when you run into a mission that just for whatever reason it's just not clicking, you move on from it.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, it's absolutely a smart addition. It's one of those things that I didn't expect from that game at all, because I wouldn't expect GTA to really want to hold anyone's hand just because of the way those games have kind of traditionally been over the years. But I think the way they implement it was smart. You have to fail a few times before they'll let you skip it. You can't just auto skip everything, and that I think is probably the best implementation they could have had of that stuff. Though playing this weekend, I found myself mostly just sticking to the story stuff. I didn't end up doing much of the side. I've actually played through a lot of the side stuff already, and I don't know why. It's just anytime I see a side mission, I feel like I have to go try it at least once before I go on to anything else. Like, it's this weird obsessive compulsive completionist in me where it's like, if there's a little dot that has a person's name on it, I feel like I have to go do it before I do the main stuff. Otherwise, I won't feel right. I won't feel clean. I'll feel like I'm not doing my job right, and it makes me. But I've gotten through most of that stuff. So I suppose mostly focused on the story this weekend, and I got through a whole bunch of it. Not spoiling anything, but I've done, I think, the bulk of the heists now.
How many? I am about to do this. I'm in a position to execute the second heist.
Okay.
I've also done a lot of side stuff leading up to that. I haven't really prioritized the heist stuff.
I've done like 5 of them, I think, 4 or 5 of them, and I think there's a couple more after that. They're building up to the big one right now, but they haven't, like, there's some other stuff going on before you get to do that, so I haven't quite gotten through all of that yet. But I've done a bunch of the heists. I will say that I was a little disappointed that none of the heists so far have actually required me to do as much planning or work to make them happen as that first heist, where you have to get, like, multiple generic gangsters on your side, to join up. You have to go, get the truck and get all the other stuff, and it's like, there are moments where you have to do some of those things in the heist that come after that, but it never feels quite as fleshed out. And I don't know, maybe some of the couple last ones will have me doing more, but I was hoping for a little bit more from the heists. I've been enjoying them, like, actually executing them has been fun, but not as much prep work as I was kind of hoping for, which sounds weird because that's not necessarily the thing I would expect to be wanting to do in a game, but I liked that. I like the way they have those set up where you have to go and you have to acquire all the things you need to do the heist.
Well, I mean, it was one of the sort of really salient points in Tom Bissell's article from last week was when you actually start breaking down all the things that you do in Grand Theft Auto, and in 5, I feel like this is as salient as it's been in previous GTAs, is a lot of mundane, weird stuff. They build a lot of game mechanics that would just be a cutscene or skipped over in any other game, purely from like a pure resources standpoint. But they build a lot of crazy, weird, one-off stuff that is built into things like that. That I appreciate on sort of like a craftsmanship level, that they took the time to do this, even if it isn't all that great. And in terms of the side mission stuff, I have found the Strangers and Freaks to be really satisfying and really interesting. I feel like the Strangers and Freaks stuff is what really makes the world come alive, because a lot of the really strange stuff is hidden away in there, and it's where it starts to make the world a little more cohesive, because GTA 4's Liberty City was much more serious, and you didn't want to be crazy and wild if you wanted to play it according to what it appeared to be Nico's character was and what the story was. But in 5, they very much want to encourage you, the way the police are more scattered, the way that you can get away from them. Like they want to encourage you to be a little crazier and not worry so much about the moment-to-moment world consequences. And that it sometimes feels like a cognitive dissonance that I think is sort of not explained but better informed when you do the Strangers and Freaks, because there are all these crazy people on the fringe or weird stuff happening on the side. I mean, I don't want to spoil any of them, because some of my favorite ones have so far been some of my favorite moments, but specifically when you're introduced to Trevor and You have a mission that involves a cult in the mountains, and I'll
Yeah.
say that's it. It's just it does so much for informing the character, and it does so much for informing the nature of the world, and it's completely optional. Yet, having done it, I feel like I have a much better sense of sort of the balance of things in the world of Los Santos.
Yeah, those Strangers and Freaks missions are where you can definitely tell that the people making that game gave. GTA 5 does not give a whole lot of shit about context. It's not really that worried about, trying to make all the pieces fit. It's more about you just trying to get into this playground as much as possible while, the narrative takes hold where it makes sense. So, when you start meeting all these weird people like the paparazzi guy and that crazy British couple and, like the cult in the mountains and all that kind of stuff, there's no real setup for any of it. You just kind of do it. And at first that was really jarring to me because I was like, why am I doing any of this? But then you start realizing, yeah, some of those missions are some of the funniest, most like bizarre things in the game. And that's why I keep going back to those and why I kind of can't let myself just leave those on the map when they're there, because a lot of times that ends up being the more interesting stuff, which I'm surprised. But I mean, I'm not saying I haven't enjoying the story. I think there are parts of that story and that narrative that are really, really good. There are other parts that don't fit together so well. But, by and large, for a game that's trying to tell 3 different stories, and combine elements of, like a wide variety of pop culture resources, it does a much better job than I think it necessarily has any right to, especially considering how slavishly it kind of dedicates itself to a lot of the same tropes and mechanics of the GTA series that have kind of been around forever.
Yeah. At the point that I'm in, obviously you're much further and could vaguely allude to whether this changes or not, but and I'll be vague here as well when I try and describe sort of one of my early issues. Franklin was sort of my early favorite character. I really liked the setup for him, but I feel like, at least in what it feels like maybe the first third of the game that I'm through, the game doesn't know what to do with him anymore. He had an interesting setup, but essentially once Trevor is introduced, Michael's
Trevor takes over that game.
Well, Trevor takes over that game, and it becomes the Michael and Trevor show, which
Right.
makes sense because that's the setup. And Franklin is the one that just sort of kind of gets caught in the mix. And I think they did a poor job of setting up Franklin for why he's even involved in this story to begin with.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot of happenstance there that sort of brings him into all of that.
And it runs really contrary to Michael and Trevor, who have a long history, a reason to like each other and hate each other. They're a lot of fun to watch those characters interact with each other, and it makes a lot of fun to play those missions as those two characters, because the way the special abilities are built, you feel like you're playing as two different type of guys that approach these scenarios differently, whereas Franklin just feels like he's there, and I don't know if that changes later in the story, if they find more meaningful reasons for him to be part of the narrative, but it does feel like his existence there is kind of forced, and it's too bad, because I feel like Michael's backstory isn't that interesting, and it only becomes interesting once Trevor is involved, and
Right.
Franklin has a potentially really interesting part to play, but at least to the point I am at, it mostly just feels like he's a third wheel,
Right.
and they haven't found sort of his footing in terms of why he has to be here.
Yeah, without saying anything specific, I will say that at the point I'm at right now, they have not necessarily fixed that yet. So, like, there is more stuff with Franklin, but nothing that's really like tied him into everything yet. So, I'm hoping that by the end of it, they will have kind of looped everything around. I know there are multiple endings. I don't know what any of them are, and I'm obviously not going to talk about that stuff right now. But I will say that I had more fun this weekend playing it than I have most of the other times I've been playing it, just because later into the game the missions start getting more interesting. Some of the later Freaks missions are pretty friggin' crazy. There's some good stuff in there.
I think you are tapping your knee.
I am?
I think I can hear your knee.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't. My knee wasn't moving, but I might have had a cable shaking or something. I don't know, but whatever.
Okay.
Other than GTA.
Yeah, you played a significant amount, or at least some of a certain high definition remake this weekend, right?
I did. I downloaded the Wind Waker HD remake like a week ago, and then I hadn't had a chance to play any of it until yesterday. In which point I sunk about 3-4 hours, I'm going to say, into it. That game holds up real well, like real well. I have not played it since it came out on the GameCube. I finished it over the course of about 6 months after it came out. Kind of savored that one for a while, and also just the tediousness of that last quarter of that game sort of kind of made me not want to pick it up a whole lot toward the end. But I hadn't played it in years and years and years. I loved the shit out of it when I played it. Other than that, some of that sailing stuff at the end, I love that game to death. And so when I found out about this remake, and they're saying, oh well, we fixed a bunch of that sailing stuff, we redrew all the art and all that shit. And I was like, well, yeah, sold. This will be my chance to actually sit down, go back, play that game, and I don't regret it one bit. It is a pricey ass remake for a game that is 10 years old at this point, but it seems like it's worth it if you're a fan. I got through to the first dungeon. I played a bunch of that. Like, the puzzles in that game hold up really well. The character interaction stuff is really good. I forgot how many weird, memorable characters were in that game. Like
Booger Kid.
Yeah, just like on Windfall Island. The first time you go there and you see the crazy dancing guy, and meet Tingle for the first time, and there's all that shit, all the weird kids around there and stuff. And it's really good. Like, all that's like the redrawn art looks fantastic. Mechanically, I was playing with the gamepad and using that for like kind of the map stuff and saving and all that, and it works well. Like, everything they've built for that remake seems smart and correct for what you would want to do if you were going to meaningfully improve on that game.
What do you do with the gamepad? Is it purely just like a map of the dungeon, or?
Yeah, like when you get the dungeon map, you can immediately access that stuff through there. You can access items, like quickly switch items into your button prompts through that. That's kind of all the stuff I've really been doing so far. I'm not sure if there's more to it than that, but those changes alone are like nice little additions, because it makes it real quick to kind of check the map, see where you're going, see what you need to do, that kind of stuff. So helpful.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in replaying that again. We've talked about that. That's like in my December slot of when it starts to get cold. That seems like the kind of game. Pour yourself a glass of whiskey and see, see where your nostalgia, which at that point, I think for the amount of time it's been since Wind Waker came out, you can appropriately say there is some nostalgia and sort of some retconning of people's opinions of that game versus what they might have felt about it at the time. And oftentimes I wonder, what is the alternate world like where Wind Waker was super appreciated the way it is now at the time? Like, what would have happened to the Zelda series had Wind Waker, which was a big experiment for them, a big going out on a limb where they maintained a lot of the legacy of the series and the tone of the series, but tried some pretty crazy things, especially in regards to the art, and it was kind of rejected, at least by the base at the time, in favor of people really wanting, a high-end, super realistic Lord of the Rings style Zelda. And obviously the tide has shifted on Wind Waker in the years hence, but what would I'm just curious what it would have been like if the future of the series had been determined by, man, people really liked Wind Waker.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, because they tried that stuff again with Phantom Hourglass and the one that came after that, which I can't really remember very much about. But Phantom Hourglass was great. Like that when that game came out, that reminded me all over again why I loved Wind Waker. Phantom Hourglass has had a few issues here and there with some of his dungeon stuff, but just seeing that art style again, seeing that universe again, seeing just kind of the stuff they built out of that, like, that shit was really cool, and it reminded me how great Wind Waker was. And the thing I was noticing when I was playing through the HD remake was that when I was playing through Twilight Princess, I had to keep forcing myself to keep going. When I was playing Skyward Sword, I had to keep forcing myself to keep going. And I never finished either of those games because I couldn't force myself to finish them. I just wasn't interested.
Yeah, I never finished Twilight either. I tried to go back to it before I reviewed Skyward Sword. And I wouldn't blame anyone for getting pretty tired of Skyward Sword, especially in the middle section, which is too bad because.
And that's exactly where I fell off on it. It was right in the middle where it just sags. It just sags.
And the final dungeons in that game are pretty. The Triforce dungeon specifically is amazing, and it's too bad. But I don't blame anyone for not getting stuck in the spot where they really needed to start trimming the fat on that game.
And that to me, the end of that point was that as I was playing through Wind Waker, I realized, holy shit, I missed most of the morning football game, and the next one's on. I should probably stop for a little bit and and actually stop and watch some TV. because I got hooked into it again immediately. Like I was immediately, sucked right back in, and I think that's, that's the most impressive quality I can assign to that game, is that I did not at any point immediately think, well, I should probably just stop playing this, which I have with the last couple of Zeldas, and I forget what I was going to say to the other point. I forgot what we were talking about.
Wind Waker's a good game.
It is a very, very good game, and it's Oh, and the other thing is that game doesn't have a lot of, other than that fetch quest at the end. That game doesn't have a lot of chaff. I know everyone complains that is the shortest, I think, among some of the major Zelda titles, but the dungeons in that game, and other than just the sailing stuff, where they've apparently shortened quite a bit. There's no fat to that game to trim. It's all pretty good to great. And so, with that in mind, I feel like I'm going to have no problem getting through that game again, especially if they've trimmed down that last bit, because that was the only part that really kind of killed me before.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to getting into that again, and I also started to get the itch it was on Friday when we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I will invoke the news briefly. They announced the lineup for the PlayStation Plus content for October, and Shadow of the Colossus is on there, the HD update that they put out as a bundle with Eco last year.
I bought that on sale from Amazon forever ago, and I still haven't actually played through the HD versions, but I have them.
You've played both games, though, right?
I played all of Eco. I played most of Shadow of the Colossus. I think I fell off it at a certain point where I just kind of lost interest. But yeah,
you need at some point.
I know what the ending of that game is. I know how it ties together.
Okay,
so I understand everything that is going on in Shadows of the Colossus. I just didn't play the whole thing. So.
Okay, so but I am severely tempted to go back. I replayed Eco. Yeah, I want to say 4 years ago, but that and Portal are like Portal. I play almost yearly, just because once you've done it once, you can do that game in about 2 hours and just sort of run through it. And I would like to get into a similar thing with Eco, but I haven't played Shadow of the Colossus since it came out, and it was astounding and also a technical mess. So I'd love to play that again. And the other thing I messed with this weekend was I got this thing.
Yeah. So I saw you put a video up this morning. Some of your early experiments with the Oculus Rift. How are you enjoying it so far, sir?
It's so I've messed with one before, and I played with one at trade shows, and I've played with Jess. So one of the things that I think is very common for people when they get an Oculus Rift dev kit is you immediately want to start showing it to other people, because you've kind of already had the first initial rush, and you want to see how other people respond to it. Mostly because I think this is going to be big, or at least this technology is going to be big, whether it's the Oculus or someone else. And so you kind of want to see if there's any validation for that. And so, showing it to other people, the first thing that you realize is that, it's immediately apparent some of the technical limitations of what's going on here, like the lower resolution. That's immediately apparent to even other people. It's like, hey, why is it so blurry? It's like, well, it'll be fixed next year. But other than that, I mean, it's unbelievable. I've only messed with like some of the initial experiments, but when you actually have a time to sort of start getting over the gimmicky nature of it, and you start spending some significant amount of time with it, and you start trying to understand it as a potential game tool, an optional device, or I guess some of the demos that I found the most impressive, and they're part of a video that went up today that'll be part of a regular feature every couple of weeks where I kind of drop in and check out some of these different experiments, are the ones where it becomes clear this is an integral part of the design, and that while you could play this game without an Oculus, it's hard to imagine it being nearly as engaging without. There were two demos that made that clear. There's one called Proton Pulse, which is basically a first-person breakout clone, where as you move your head around, you're moving a little block, and you're using that to send a ball back, and you're trying to just use the physics in order to clear all the balls, all the blocks out of the way. Which, not in terms of gameplay design, like not all that new and innovative. Like we've played plenty of those games before, but there is something so intuitive about moving your head around that it's a completely new spin on it that completely worked for me. And the other one is a hacking game. I don't even know how to pronounce it. CIESS, CIES, or I'm not sure. Anyway,
CIESS. How about that?
Yeah, and In this one, you're doing things similar to that, where you are using your head to look around an entire matrix, and the matrix around you has different defense grids that you're trying to hack into, and it's not what's just in front of you. You actually have to look all the way around to find the different weak points, and it's really cool to actually sit down and enjoy these experiences that I can't imagine playing them in any other scenario. And also the ones that were interesting so one of the first things that happens, especially with this dev kit version, is nausea. And the nausea is largely generated from not only the lower resolution, but the fact that the head tracking is not at where it's going to be in the final one. So when you move your head really fast, it doesn't actually follow exactly what you're doing. It's just behind enough to create a weird sense for your eyes where you start freaking out. And
your visual perception is technically lagging behind the actual movement of your body.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that induces a lot of nausea very quickly.
Right.
So the demos that I would play, including one where you have an elephant, and the elephant is moving on a fixed path right forward, and as you move your head, you're moving its tusk and or snout. I don't know. What do you? An elephant's just
we'll go snout.
Not as zoologist.
Trunk.
Trunk. Yeah. Yes. There you go. And you're moving that around and knocking into things. And when you have a fixed perspective where the gameplay is all rooted in your head being the primary sort of like interactivity, I found that the nausea kind of completely went away, and I could swing my head around and not worry about it too much. Yeah, so I'm excited to check out more of that stuff. Tomorrow, the beginning of Shocktober, I'm definitely going to be checking out a series of horror-related Oculus games that have gotten a lot of interest recently. So that terrifies me. I think the idea of being trapped in this. Yeah, I don't know. That might be too much. But that's exactly what I'm looking for. Is
just too much. Is just scare overload for Patrick Klepek? Because look, man, it's been a hard year. I don't need you. I don't need you checking out on us. I don't need you having a heart attack playing that stuff. If it's gonna be bad, maybe just back off a little bit. You don't have to test yourself for us, man. We want you around for the long term.
I had also looked into, and I haven't been able to figure out how to make it work in a way that would be interesting. But at one point, I was sent a game that has a heart rate monitor, and I have the heart rate monitor, but I don't have like the USB adapter that it needs to send the data from the heart rate monitor to the computer. Because I was toying with the idea of trying to get my heart rate displayed in real time during these videos, but I don't know where the USB adapter went, and the adapter's like $50. So.
Can you just get like a regular USB heart rate monitor for not that much?
I don't know. I think someone knows more than me. Maybe. I think it would be hilarious to have my heart rate monitored in real time on a video. But yeah. So anyway, why don't we transfer over to some headlines?
Yeah. Why don't we? A few things have happened since last week. I think we can finally round out the entirety of our extensive Valve coverage from last week by talking a little bit about the Steam controller, which was announced on Friday. So this is the final step in Valve's attempt to take over your living room. After the Steam Machine, Steam OS, not Steam iOS, Steam OS were announced, Steam controllers come along, and it is a weird-ass looking controller. It's got 2 track pads instead of analog sticks. The button placement looks kind of funky. It's got this kind of inverse shape to it. A lot of just non-traditional elements to this controller design, but
haptic feedback.
Haptic feedback is a thing
which is key. I think if you read Kotaku, Steven Totilo has collected a number of opinions of folks that have already played with the controller. Some that went over and tried it out not long after Valve announced it, including one of the designers on Super Meat Boy,
Tommy,
if there is a game that would put a stress test on a controller that doesn't have traditional input, I think Super Meat Boy is a great case for it.
Totally.
And a bunch of other developers, including PC folks. And the haptic feedback seems to be pretty key to what makes this thing work, because the haptic feedback is sort of linked to helping simulate some of those buttons and how and simulating some of that traditional input that we expect from these controllers. And Tommy came out of it. There's a long blog post he wrote for Gamasutra where he goes into great detail about how it worked and didn't work. And he basically came away from it pretty positive and thinking there just needed to be some tweaks made, and that there will probably be games that are better on an Xbox 360 controller. The fact that he was able to come away with it being like, they're pretty close, I think is probably more than a lot of people expected based on the reactions to the controller design.
I've been reading through a lot of the reactions since Friday and just seeing the usual avalanche of just abject hatred for it because it's not kind of what we traditionally expect from controller tech. And all I could think about when I was writing that thing up, other than the fact that I didn't completely understand how any of it worked, because I don't really know what haptic feedback means. Like, I had to read that description of what any of that shit meant like 6 times before I finally just said, you know what, I'm just going to reprint this, because I can't accurately describe what any of this means.
Well, it's been a buzzword for so long.
Yeah.
Like, we've heard haptic feedback for 10 years, but it's like an Oculus, where it's like, I think we've sort of written it off because we've heard the buzzword a million times. But that doesn't mean that the technology is irrelevant. It just needed to go into the right hands, and maybe this is an indication of that happening.
And that's exactly what I came away with. It was that, you know what, maybe there's something to this. Maybe this actually has some merit to it. Maybe that Valve isn't completely out of their minds. Because again, as much as this whole thing seems like a really crazy gamble on their part, think about how long we've been talking about them doing this. And by the time we found out about it, how much time do you think they'd spent working on this shit before anyone even got a hint that they were working on their own machine or any of this other stuff? I don't feel like they're a company that takes stupid gambles. I feel like they're a company that, if maybe even to a fault, considers their decisions to the point where, there's very little chance that they're going into any of this half-assed. So if they're going with this design, it's because they probably feel like it does genuinely have some merit to it. They have tested it with people, and they've gotten positive feedback. So that says to me I should at least give it an open shot. Actually put my damn hands on the thing before I start immediately judging it as the stupidest thing ever made. Now, the one thing I did find interesting was that they announced all this without giving anyone really any noteworthy hands-on time with it. Now we're starting to hear about some developers getting to check it out, and that feedback is coming back, and we're starting to see it, and it actually seems pretty positive, which is great. I just think that it was weird that they chose to do this without letting anyone try it and having some impressions go up at the same time, because that could have negated some of that just immediate knee-jerk, what the fuck is this, if people were actually saying, no, here's how it works, and here's how it actually feels, and this is why it actually makes sense. I don't know, that strategy struck me as weird.
They could have negated a lot of it by just having a video that went with it that maybe showed, hey, here's how ideally we expect the controller to work, and here are practical applications of it. But Valve does what Valve does, and they're not infallible. And I think their PR strategy for last week was interesting, but flawed in some ways. But we will still hang on every word of theirs going forward. Nothing will change. And to your point about maybe this is a stupid risk, like I look at that as a positive. We have essentially been on a singular iterative path since the N64 controller. Since the introduction of the analog stick, we have had iterations on what that means for video games. We added a second analog stick. We changed the position of those analog sticks into 2 of our thumbs. We have largely, the additions that have come since the introduction of the analog stick, if you put aside motion controls, like we're purely talking about sort of the traditional game controller, they haven't been like big sweeping changes. Like, they have been welcomed great changes. Like the PS4, the Xbox One controllers, I feel like are the epitome, are like the pinnacle of where you take this type of controller design. We have taken them about as far as we can go, and we're starting to just get into gimmicky territory like the touchpad on the PS4, which
this thing has a touchscreen too. This thing has a touchpad.
But it's a touch screen, which is different than a touchpad. Those are fundamentally different concepts in terms of what they can do. And you know what? I wouldn't like if Valve just made it a two analog controller that had a touchscreen, like that wouldn't be that different. Like the only way that games change are through like fundamental shifts in innovation and thinking. And this is maybe won't work. Maybe it won't go anywhere. But at least someone is trying something different. And this isn't take away from, I think, the probably hard-earned like iteration is difficult too, but iteration isn't the end-all be-all. And I'm glad that someone is taking a fundamental rethink of controller decisions that were made 10 years ago and saying we don't necessarily have to be locked into what came before. Just because it's working doesn't mean that it's right or we have to stay. And so I'm glad that someone like Valve, who's in a position to say fuck it, is saying fuck it and deciding to do something completely crazy, because they're kind of the only ones in a position to take that sort of risk. And they're not taking away from other controllers. You can still use your Xbox controller, you can still use your keyboard and mouse, but maybe there is a better way or a different way, and I'm glad that they're taking the risk to do it.
The timing is interesting because this is the first generation I can remember where, you know, again, sort of excluding the Wii U, perhaps unfairly, but just for the sake of this argument, where the new hardware, the controllers are kind of universally beloved. Like, nobody has had anything negative to say about the Xbox One controller. Nobody's had anything mean to say about the PS4 controller. People love those things. Anyone who gets their hands on them loves them. So, you know, doing this kind of radical shift when it feels like we're at a point now where maybe these hardware makers have started to a degree, perfect the basic core design of the same types of controllers we've been using for at least a couple of generations now, feels right. It feels like the right time. You know, we're not waiting around for, you know, whatever the next thing is when, you know, people are desperately fumbling trying different things. Now it's like, okay, well, we have these two systems that have these great traditional controllers, the Microsoft ones, which we use with Windows machines and all that stuff. And now we have Valve over here trying something kind of radically different that's not just, you know, a Wii U gamepad, which is its own kind of crazy haptic feedback trackball nonsense. And I'm glad for it. I'm happy. I'm looking forward to trying it. You know, the whole package of this Steam machine, the Steam OS, the Steam controller thing, all sounds a little crazy to me, but this is one of the few times when something sounding totally crazy actually sounds like the kind of crazy I want to get behind and want to try out. So good for them. They got me interested.
They're gonna follow through, like, for better or worse. You know, I expect that Valve will see this through. To what end, I don't know, but I am confident when they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it.
Agreed.
So this isn't
except for Half-Life 3.
They never announced that.
Sure. Or, well, they did announce Half-Life Episode 3, which, again,
I guess that's true. That's true. They can get off on a technicality.
Yeah.
Some other stuff happened. Frictional Games, developers of Amnesia, are currently in the midst of teasing their next game. We're a couple of weeks out from Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, which was not made by Frictional. That was handed off to the Chinese Room, who worked on Dear Esther. But it seems like that is the appropriate time to maybe announce what Frictional is up to next. They've been rumored to be working on a space-set horror game, which appears to be that might be the next frontier. There's a game called Routine. People have seen the video for that going around. That is basically a space horror roguelike in first person that looks terrifying, and it sounds like Frictional is going to take to space as well, which makes me super excited because I loved Dead Space, and I think there is a lot to explore in crazy AIs or in aliens and things of that nature that games have not really touched upon too much.
Yeah, because, I mean, the Dead Space games should have totally been my jam straight through. Like, the first one I did really like. A few, complaints aside, I thought the first Dead Space game was pretty terrific. But just the problem I've always had with those games is that they're too much about Doom-style monster scares than, like, just, the kind of pervasive sense of dread and unease that one is sort of kind of meant to feel. Because space horror is all about feeling just tragically alone. Just totally isolated and, just so far off the map from where anything normal resides. And those games, especially the later sequels, just got too actiony and too not really about the atmosphere for me. Those guys doing something with space horror fills me with a simultaneous sense of glee and dread like few other things have. Like, knowing the kind of stress that Amnesia put me through, I am simultaneously very much looking forward to seeing what they would do with, a kind of more extraterrestrial setting. And also deeply, deeply anxious about actually sitting down to play something like that.
Yeah, I feel like the countdown has begun yet again for me to be excited when Frictional announced they have delayed their next game, because that's basically how I felt every time Machine for Pigs was like, oh, it turns out we're not coming out in the spring, we're coming out in the fall, and I was like I have dodged a bullet. I don't have to play that game, and I just got through Outlast and Amnesia Machine for Pigs, so like even though I'm going to be playing horror games throughout this month on the site, like I do not expect any of them to be on the level of either of those games, except for maybe these Oculus games. Particularly there was one that I've heard is really it's going to do a number on me. But yeah, the countdown has begun. They have a website that seems to be progressing based on like refreshes, so we should be hearing about it pretty soon. But I'm excited to see what they're doing, especially because over the weekend there was also Never Ending Nightmares. We had Matt Gilgenbach on the show not too long ago, and his Kickstarter for his horror game, which is partially rooted in some of his own OCD and depression and other issues, got funded. He was asking for I think $99,000, and it went over. There was some. I don't know if he followed some of the drama that went alongside that Kickstarter.
All I saw was that it was real down to the wire. I wasn't really paying too much attention beyond that, but that I knew it was getting real close to the end there before he went over.
So Joystick has a good story summarizing what happened, but the gist of it is that this guy Gabriel Pinto, who's a backer from Brazil, he wanted to raise his pledge. He'd already pledged, and he wanted to increase it. That's one of the common ways that people will try and create momentum at the end,
Sure.
is increase it from 15 to 20. And if everyone does that, then you can get a pretty significant boost collectively. So he wanted to raise his pledge to 95, but however he typed it in, Kickstarter interpreted that as 9,500, and that 9,500 put the Kickstarter over the asking amount. And one of the rules that kicks in, if you are the person, one of you are the person, but once it hits its pledge amount, you can't reduce your pledge to defund the project, essentially. So
Right.
So like you can reduce how much you've pledged, but if what you reduce is going to bring it under, it won't allow you to do that. And
Right.
so this kid had meant to contribute basically $100, and now he was on the hook for 10,000. And so there are a couple things that can happen once a Kickstarter project has reached its goal. If it reaches its goal, and then at the point that Amazon then starts collecting the payments from users, if there are payments that don't go through, like if that 10,000 couldn't be paid, Matt Gilgenbach still gets the rest of the money.
Sure.
They don't. Once it's closed, they're not going to penalize you because there were a couple of guys that screwed up. But fortunately, like this kid Gabriel Pinto went into the comments, explained his dilemma, and then people started raising their pledge amounts so that he could bring his down. And then eventually, there was enough momentum in the final hours that he was able to bring his down to his 95 pledge amount that he wanted to actually give. So there's a happy story for everyone involved.
Yay.
But I can't imagine he said he like submitted it and then he just started crying and there was nothing he could do and he felt terrible, and it's just, yeah, it seems like there's a lot of stress that goes into these Kickstarters. And
crowdfunding is a crazy, wild, woolly fucking place right now, and it seems like that is not going to go away anytime soon, especially when it comes to some of the hopes and dreams of people being shattered. Speaking of hopes and dreams being shattered by Kickstarter, or crowdfunding in general, it's worth noting that the Shadows of the Eternals project has now officially been put on hold after the last Kickstarter did not go through. Mm-hmm. This is, of course, the team that famously came out of Silicon Knights, Dennis Dyack and team, trying to make this thing happen with multiple Kickstarters, variety press blitzes, like trying everything they possibly could to get a community behind this thing for a spiritual successor to Eternal Darkness. Did not happen. It is going on hold. Patrick, you and I have actually had the chance to talk to these guys. We've had a chance to kind of, see where these things have kind of gone wrong. Is there a future for this game? Like, is there a chance that this comes back in, a year or two and, finally people get behind it and they do something? Or, is there even a chance that this studio does anything from here? I kind of don't really know what to make of any of it, honestly.
No, I think any sort of teasing about this project's status or potential future is just saving face and wanting to not explain this in the bleak terms that are probably more accurate. I really don't expect that Shadows of the Eternals will be coming back. I think the amount of baggage that goes with that name at this point, if there is a game from the ashes of Shadow of the Eternals, it's going to be called something else.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think having to bring all of that along with it would be a positive for a new project. So, you know, the idea that Dennis Dyack will eventually get to work on a spiritual successor to Eternal Darkness, you know, my guess is it's someday he manages to pull that off. But, you know, he blew his one shot to make that happen through crowdfunding. That's never going to happen. So now he needs to try and see if he can make that happen through traditional funding. But I can't imagine after a crowdfunding project goes as awry as this one did that anyone's going to be interested in investing in something like that. So,
No.
you know, basically, I think what has to happen here is that stuff goes on hold. Dennis Dyack needs to regroup. You know, he needs a hit game. He needs a reason for people to believe in him again as a designer. And
he's going to have to do it anonymously at this point, I think. Like, I think he's going to have to go somewhere and just make a game without making a big deal about the fact that he's involved before people will start to trust him again. Because it's pretty clear that the name Dennis Dyack is something of a poison pill now. It did them no favors whatsoever, you know, in including him in the marketing for that crowdfunding project. Like, there was nothing about Dennis Dyack's presence helped that game. Maybe creatively it did in terms of the actual project, but in terms of promoting it, none whatsoever. No one else there, you know, nothing else about that team really leapt out at people or really said, you know, hey, you know, that makes us want to fund this, that makes us want to pay for this project. So I don't see a real future for that group. You know, I hate to say that for you know, something that is obviously, you know, put together quickly and they obviously want to try and make a go of it, but like, I don't know. I can't see that group trying to promote anything at this point, especially after the debacle, you know, they've gone through here. Because, like you said, who the hell is going to invest in a project for a studio that couldn't get one game crowdfunded like multiple times? It just doesn't seem like the sort of thing you would want to throw your money after.
No, definitely not. And I expect we will hear from Dennis Dyack again, but I expect he will be going underground for a little while going forward. But
think of him like a Bond villain. You know, he escaped at the end of the movie. He's going to run off for a while. He's going to build his new secret lair and get his new henchmen together. And then, you know, 2 or 3 sequels down the line, he'll be back with an all-new adventure. It'll be fantastic.
You're probably right. I still would like to chat with him about Eternal Darkness. I still want to play through that game. The couple hours I played last summer were hugely entertaining, and I think I probably still would enjoy quite a lot about that game. So maybe that's something I can try and sneak into this month. We'll see. So for anyone that wants to shoot us some questions, why don't you hit me up in the chat as we start to wind down the show with the last couple of headlines, and we will hit some of those up before we say goodbye.
We leave. Yes. I got nothing else. So whatever you got, throw it at me.
Let's see. Sega CCO says no current plans for Yakuza 5 in the West. Big shock. Big shock. I pulled up the lineup for PlayStation Plus in October, which also includes Hotline Miami and Kings of Amalur: Reckoning.
Ah, yes.
I have not. I've been hovering over purchasing Hotline Miami for my Vita a number of times, or rather Office Vita. That I guess might as well be my Vita. And I'm super excited to play that game on a Vita. I think that is perhaps maybe the most ideal of places to play that game.
Totally.
So I never finished it, so I'm looking forward to actually maybe doing that this time around. And I doubt I will play Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning, but by all accounts, that is a pretty decent game.
I'm told good things about it. Not the sort of thing I generally tend to play, but you know, I'll probably download it and then never play it. But you know, I have not taken full advantage of PS Plus the way I should have. There have been a lot of games that I've downloaded and not really spent the time playing. But I will definitely play some Hotline Miami on my Vita, especially this week since I'm going to be constantly traveling back and forth between the city and Queens for events and stuff. So that would be a good time to get some Hotline Miami going.
Yeah, that's a good point. Feder Dave asks, what are your Alex Giant Bomb's plans to cover GTA Online's launch? Alex, do you actually think that is going to launch this week?
Yes.
You think so?
Oh God,
Okay.
is that this week? Really?
Yeah, October 1st.
If there's, I mean, I don't know. I feel like if it was going to be delayed, they would have said something by now. So I'm guessing it will launch. I don't know what kind of shape it'll be in. Maybe it'll be ready, maybe it won't. But my guess is, sometime around Unprofessional Fridays, you will certainly see some people playing some GTA Online. Don't quote me on that, because for all I know, Jeff could,
Quoted.
you know, he could see this and be like, "Fuck no, we're not doing that." But I don't think he would. I imagine there will be some video coverage in there somewhere. I'll play it once it's out and I can, kind of mess around with it. I'm sure you will check it out at some point and we will talk about it. Giant Bomb's coverage plans for GTA Online outlined right now. There you go. That's it. Yep. I just did it.
Let's see. Potu Skull asked, will Microsoft and Sony have one more event to talk about their systems? My guess is, there are no more major events in terms of ones where the industry comes together, like a PAX or a TGS or an E3. But there will Xbox is going on the road. They're doing a road show. They're stopping in various cities. My guess is Sony will probably do something similar. Those are pretty common leading up to console launches.
Sony did a couple of things about a month ago in a few cities where it was mostly them showing builds that were at Gamescom. So there's a possibility they might try and do something else for their first-party stuff. Microsoft might do the same. Don't know. Now is the time when third-party publishers are going around and hawking their wares a little bit. So, I'm going to go see all of EA's next-gen stuff for the next couple weeks. So the sports stuff this week, and then Need for Speed next week. Other companies are starting to grumble about showing some of that stuff here and there. So what I think at this point, the major companies, like the console makers, are not as heavily touting the press, because I think they've kind of done the major press runs for those consoles. Now it's kind of up to the games publishers to get the games out there in front of people before November comes around and completely swallows this industry whole. So at this point, it's going to be one-off events for various games. I don't think there's going to be any more big collective events that I'm aware of. I've asked a couple of times and not really gotten much response from anyone, so it doesn't sound like that's in the immediate future going to happen.
I wouldn't be surprised if there are launch-style events. There will certainly most likely be. You'll get sort of a last wave of impressions from games, especially as those next-gen versions get locked down. Where the press is, invited to come out and see all of that stuff on final hardware and things like that. But by all indications we have heard, in terms of the press getting access to games and hardware for launch, a lot of that stuff is going to be coming in very hot, unless things change. Chris Tilton. Oh, look, Chris Tilton getting into the chat, asking questions. Will Xbox One and PS4's Twitch integration at all change how you guys stream games for features, particularly you and Alex? Maybe, but we'll have to see how all that stuff actually functions. The big question mark there is getting that archived on the site. Twitch has famously poor abilities for you to pull down video files, even ones that you have streamed and created in your profile. There are tools to do so, but those tools involve you pulling down videos in 30-minute chunks.
Not ideal by any stretch.
Yeah, and you can recompile those in Adobe Premiere, and there are ways of doing all of this stuff, but actually making any sort of assumptions about it is tough before we can actually see how all of that stuff works, what the compression looks like. But yeah, I don't have an Elgato, but I should probably just pick one up at this point.
Here's what I'll say about the Elgato, just before you run out and buy one of those things. If you plan on having yourself on camera, it's kind of a pain in the ass, because there is a several-second delay between what appears on your computer and what appears in what is recorded of you talking. You can set mic delay in that thing, which helps, but you can't set camera delay. So it's it can get real tricky when you're trying to record. Like, you can watch the TV and not have to watch that footage, but then there is delay between what you're talking about and what is going on in the footage, and it's a little bit. It's one of those things I have not completely figured out yet. I found a couple of workarounds, but they're not ideal. So just no. Otherwise, the Elgato is a great piece of capture hardware. It's just that one thing that drives me fucking crazy. So.
Interesting. Well, it still seems to be the best option, but we'll see. Maybe if this Twitch integration maybe will provide a better solution for some occasional console content, which certainly
let's hope
you and I do less of because of the technical limitations. The Bio Lover, who is reviewing Rain? Probably no one, but I'm very much looking forward to playing it because that's also another game that comes out this week. God
Yeah,
damn it.
we'll certainly have some kind of coverage of that game, but I'm not of the. I don't believe anyone is currently working on reviewing that game.
No,
So,
my guess is there'll be a quick look, and
yes.
I will certainly be playing it because what I saw of it at E3 looked really promising,
Yeah.
and I like the stuff that Sony Japan puts out. All right, let's see if we can pick one.
Just before you grab a question, you were talking
Uh-huh.
about reviewing a couple of those horror games this month, right?
Yeah, Amnesia and Outlast. I figure rather than just, I mean, I was going to sit down and write up my thoughts on them. I suppose I might as well put a score next to it
Yeah, why not?
and make those a review.
I've got Beyond next, so that'll be interesting.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I
It
redeemed.
hasn't showed up yet, but it's supposed to be coming to me. So
I went on Facebook and redeemed a code so I could get a demo of that. When does that come out? Is that later this?
that's next week.
What?
Yeah, October 8th.
Oh, Alex is all the games.
I know, and we haven't even hit November yet. Which November, if anything's going to kill us, it's going to be the weeks between November 15th and November 27th. Those days are going to destroy us.
I think Link to the Past 2 and Super Mario 3D World come out on the same day.
As the Xbox One.
Fuck.
Yeah. So
Just go on vacation.
yeah. Yeah, take your time off where you can because you're fucked for November.
God. Dude, I will at least acknowledge that people are asking for thoughts on Breaking Bad, but I don't feel like this is the appropriate venue to even talk in the vaguest terms, except that I really enjoyed it.
Sure.
That is all I will say. I don't know. I think we covered.
We covered some stuff.
We covered some stuff. So what do you got going on the site this week? Are you just traveling a lot?
Yeah, I'm not traveling exactly. I'm just going into the city a bunch. So I'm seeing the last stuff for WWE 2K14 today. I'm going to go see a couple of Ubisoft games tomorrow, Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed. At which point I'm going to ask why South Park's not there and punch Stone Chin in the face. And then later this week I'm seeing the EA Sports Next Gen stuff. So there's a lot of games to go see and a lot of things that I will hopefully be able to report back on by the next show, unless embargoes start getting real stupid on me again. But other than that, once Beyond gets here, I'll be working on that for review and just kind of trying to bang out other stuff where I can. What about you? What do you got coming up?
I got jury duty.
That's not. You can't put that on the website. That's not content.
I feel like I found a lot of ways to get a lot of content on the site. I feel like I can shoehorn jury duty in there somehow. Can you bring a laptop to jury duty? Probably not.
Can you live stream jury duty? I don't think you can do that. I think legally you can't do that.
Probably not. It's just a one-day thing, like worst case scenario. So I guess I could show up and be dismissed. But I went 6 years without getting called in San Francisco. I'm here back in the Chicagoland area for 2 months. I get a letter in the mail. So I have that on Thursday. So I don't know how much I'll be doing on Thursday. But today, my big thing I have to do is I have to get together my Shocktober list of horror films. I think I'll put those up. I'll put that up on the site.
I'm thinking I might go with you on this year. Like I might try and stick to your schedule a little bit and take the ride with you.
So that'll be a list that goes up on the site. People have asked me about that, so I might as well just. Usually the way I've structured it in the past is just there'll be 31 trailers and 31 movies, and then you can kind of go at it however you may. And then some Spook'em Scoops, Oculus Rift Edition tomorrow night. Because I can use the Rift, I don't necessarily need it to be pitch black out, so maybe I'll start that a little bit earlier than usual because it's going to be pitch black inside that thing anyway. And then, I have a lot of interviews to conduct this week related to various horror-related things that'll be happening. So a lot of that's happening this week. I already banked an interview with the lead designer of Outlast.
Awesome.
Talking to both the lead designer of Amnesia: The Dark Descent and the designer on A Machine for Pigs in separate interviews this week. And some
Real
other,
quick question,
some other...
without actually asking any details. Did the one interview come together? The one that we talked about that you were excited about?
Yeah.
Good.
My Hail Mary email to a creepy website? Yeah,
good.
So we'll actually see if I get the answers to that. But so cool. A lot of that stuff is going to be my focus Not exclusively, but I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more themed content in that capacity throughout the month. But other than that, I guess that's a show.
That is a show.
That's a show. Alex, you should do your weekly column again. People keep asking.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. All right. So that is Bomb in the AM with Scoops in the Wolf for the Monday. Alex, assuming I don't go to jail on Thursday, like the jury duty is not where they send you to jail, right?
I don't know. I've actually never done jury duty before, so I can't tell you.
You want to just fly out? Just do mine.
No.
Okay, fine. We're gonna end the show.
All right.
Bye, Alex. I'll see you on
Later,
Friday.
dude. Woo.